Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effect podcast. So we're currently looking at the game The Last Stop. So to recap, I've already played this game. Jack is freshly playing it, so he's just finished the second set of chapters. Following John and Jack, I guess now, Donna and Mina. I'll just start very simple, Jack. What did you make of those chapters?
So, you know how we're sort of saying in like the whole chapter ones, I was very, I suppose, mixed story and gameplay. Um, I suppose my overall feeling is that is still the same. However, it's almost like it's got to the point where I've just started to accept the game for what it is. And I think the point you raised in the last video really struck a chord with me in the sense that I went into this thinking it was going to be like some not like very very sophisticated interactive drama, but at least sort of telltale level. But now I realise that it's not that, and it's just sort of you sort of playing these different stories and sort of getting something out of them. I've warmed to it a bit, and I think that it does have some charm. So I think that's probably where I'm at after all these sort of chapter 2 parts.
Yeah, definitely. I think the word charm's a very good way of putting it because, like I say, it never was going to be a breathtaking game. You know, if they put a lot of time into it, it probably could have been. But yeah, it's just one of those really nice little adventures, really, which is just a nice bit of difference. Yeah, we'll go right into the chapters, I guess, to sort of see how you thought of them. Who did you play first? Was it Donna, Mina, or Jack slash John, I guess?
So yeah, I stuck with the same order. So I started with Mina, the domestic affairs sort of series, if you like, and the episode essentially starts, and you're visiting your dad called Samir, and you're sort of having a bit of chit chat. You sort of walk to sort of the park or like to an allotment or something. You have a chat. And what I thought it was quite a nice touch, probably the best bit of Mina's series so far, is she has like this meaningful conversation with her dad about marriage. Because like clearly she's got marriage problems of herself, and she sort of asks him like, you know, dad, like, you've been with mum for 40 years, like that, is there any sort of problems in that time? That's a long time to be with someone. And I just thought it was a nice touch. It gave a little bit of character depth, and it showed a different side to Mina, that she just wasn't like this sort of total bitch. So I really appreciated that. But then I don't know, he sort of comes back at you like quite strongly, so you'd never really get answers from that. You end up just sort of going back to his house or apartment, where you then find drugs, and sort of understandably, Mina is quite angry about this, and she wonders where he gets it from, and he sort of palms it off, saying, "Oh, they're sort of psychedelic drugs, nothing serious, nothing to worry about." And to cut a long story short, it sort of leads to this point where Mina is going to meet a dealer called Spider. Um, I don't know if this is a theory, like this could be completely wrong. Um, but the dealer Spider, he sort of semi looks like Jack a little bit, from like the John episodes. So whether that's something later on that they're related, or whether it's literally like it's just a similar character model, I really don't know. But it's an observation that I noticed in the episode. Did you have a sort of a similar observation, or?
Yeah, I mean, I never realized that Spider looks like John. I'm looking at videos now and I do see what you mean, actually. But yeah, I guess there are a lot of, like I mentioned in the last episode, and it didn't really happen so much in the first chapters, but you will probably have noticed, having played this chapter two anyway, there are a lot of crossovers. So some of the side characters will bleed into other episodes. So I believe you would have seen Mina's husband in Donna's chapter. I believe you would have seen Amy from Mina's chapters inside is it Donna's chapter?
No, it's John.
Oh, John's, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
In John's. So yeah, there's a lot of I quite like that. And I think as well you sort of see John, or I guess Jack in John's body, when you're walking down the street as Mina at one point. I don't know if you spotted him. He's in a bus stop, like having a little sulk.
I did, yeah, and it's funny. I forgot to mention it in the last episode, but when I was playing as, I believe, yeah, it was when I was playing as John in the last episode. I did see Mina. So it is very cleverly done how they're slowly starting to integrate the characters into each of the stories. I do like that, and I'm intrigued to see where it goes. It's a slow coming together of all the people that you either play as or that you meet through the various characters. So yeah, I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, so while we're on the topic of Mina then, so yeah, I guess I'll confirm as well. I definitely find her, and I haven't, hid my opinions that I find her the weaker of the three characters, but certainly the weaker story of the three. I do think chapter 2 steps it up a little bit. The first one is very much just introducing characters. It's very slow. Half of it seems like you're just leaving your work. But this one has the nice balance of a meaningful conversation. That's what I meant to say, with the father. Like you say, talking about the marriage problems and whether he could relate. I really like the father as a character as well. Some really nice, playful conversations. I quite like the way he tries to, not get rid of the drugs, but try to encourage Mina to take some as well, which is quite a funny moment. But yeah, you've also got the struggling family scenes, as well as Mina meeting the GP, or sorry, or the what's his name? Felix, is it?
That's it. Yeah, Felix.
Yeah, so Felix's daughter. So yeah, that was a very interesting scene as well. So yeah, what did you think of that scene when you bump into the daughter there?
Yeah, so like at this point, I mean, it's sort of quite a strange revelation that Felix has been telling his daughter about this. Um, that children, they can gossip, and she could go to school and say these things, word could get around. Like, you don't know, that could come back and bite the pair on the arse later on. In my version, it was sort of brushed under the carpet pretty quickly. She just sort of said like a little teasing line to him, and then they obviously banged or whatever. Which actually comes to a point that I've got written down here, is that after that sequence, like, there's a very sudden time jump and you're back outside again. And I feel like maybe there was a scene in there missing. Maybe they could have bridged that a little bit better. And it's something I've noticed a little bit in the game. There are just like these random time jumps. You're back outside again. You're back inside again. It's just something I've noticed so far in the games. I think as well, prior to that point, you do sort of use this sort of text feature, which I quite like. Like, as the character's walking, you can like read the texts between Mina and her husband. I think he's called Dan, and you're getting a sense of their home life. He's obviously getting a bit annoyed that she's constantly late, and that's rubbing off onto her child as well, because he only wants to have his dad tuck him in at night. So there is this sort of growing sense of isolation on her part, which I think is sort of good to explore later on in the game. And I suppose the crucial moment in the episode is when she comes across the drug dealer. I know you wanted to talk about is it sort of like I don't know how to describe it. When you're sort of you're scanning him at one point, aren't you?
Yeah, very interesting. So I believe you do you do it twice this episode? Do you do it with the father or the break-in, is it?
Yes, you do it with the father, yeah, for the drugs, and then you do
Yeah,
it
the
with the drug
drugs.
dealer, yeah.
Yeah, and I believe I can't remember if you do it in the first episode when you first meet Amy. I can't remember, but that's it's nice that each character gets their own unique little thing. And Mina, probably the weaker of the character. It's nice that she gets something that the others don't get, and that is the scanning, because it does make you think that Mina is this very smart, competent woman who is very accomplished in her career, and yeah, it just has that little edge. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed that scene with Spider. Yeah, it's one of those ones where the pace changes a little bit, the tone's different, but there's a little bit of humor in there as well. I quite like the fact that when you scan, he has a 2% chance of hurting you, and I think he's called Pathetic. I'm pretty sure that's what comes up above the thing.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that gave me a little tickle. But yeah, one thing I wanted to ask you with Mina is she's obviously trying to help her dad out. She has these relationship troubles. So when she goes to see Spider, she's obviously late to come home, so she's missing dinner. And then Dan raises concerns about it. Are you feeling more empathy towards Mina? Are you very much like, nah, I hate a cheater. I don't have no empathy for this character whatsoever. Um, and are your opinions of her changing throughout the two chapters that you've played?
I wouldn't. Well, I wouldn't say they're necessarily changing because, yeah, like she's cheating on her husband and she's cheating on her kid as well. Like that's just how I view things anyway. Um, but I do think, in terms of her character, like she's very strong, isn't she? That can actually come to benefit, like the instance with the drug dealer. Um, so yeah, in terms of her character, no, I wouldn't say I'm empathetic towards her, but I'm almost glad that she's got this sort of strong backbone because it makes me feel like that she can deal with the drug dealer. She can sort of, and he threatens her as well at the end of that scene. I thought that was going to be the cliffhanger. I thought that would have been a good ending to chapter 2 for Mina. Plus, she's got this sort of competitive edge as well because she's got Amy competing with her for this job. So I wouldn't feel empathetic for her, but it's clear that she does have a lot on her plate.
Yeah, definitely. So the episode obviously ends with her going back into the job, her realizing that Amy's going to be tougher competition than she thought. And then the episode very much just ends then and there. So probably we were discussing beforehand, not much of a cliffhanger again. So I guess my question to you is, what would you want to see from the Mina chapters going forward, considering you're nearly halfway with them now? What kind of things would you want to see different? Would you still say it's the weaker of the three as well?
Would I say it's the weaker of the three? That's interesting. That because I would say not this time around. For me personally, don't know why. I think it's perhaps the emotional conversation with the dad, the drug dealer thing, and the sort of encounter with the daughter. Those sort of three things jump to my mind quicker than some of the stuff that even happens in Donna's chapter. Like, I mean, I know we'll come on to it in a minute, but there's sort of things in that. It's only really the ending that grabs me in Donna's chapter 2. In terms of going forward for Mina, though, I'd probably say I'd want to see what happens with the drug dealer. Could her father end up getting threatened for whatever reason? Could the drug dealer follow her and see that she's having an affair with Felix, and then he could use that as leverage against her? I don't know. Like, to be fair, as although sort of the first one wasn't convincing, there are lots of ways that this one could go now. So my expectations have gone up with this one.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, and I do agree. Her chapter 2 definitely steps up big time. I almost wonder if they could have, shared a bit of that content of chapter 2 into chapter 1 to spice the opener up a little bit more. But yeah, brilliant. So yeah, you happy to move on to another character, or do you have any other points to do with Mina's chapter there?
No, yeah, happy to move on. So, in terms of what I played next, yeah, it sort of stuck to the same order. It was Donna's chapter, so the Stranger Danger series. And from what I remember from this one, you start off and you run back to your sister Emma and her girlfriend Ash. And I think what they did well in this episode was sort of give Ash a more prominent role. She sort of takes the role of, she's not family per se, she's sort of a slight outsider. So she tries to get Donna to confide in her on the bus, and even when they get off the bus a couple of times to say, you know, if there's a problem. And again, with the dialogue choices, I don't know if it's sort of, if you can do that or whether it very much follows one path and, you know, it doesn't really matter. But from there on in, you end up going back to the sort of area where you're holding the stranger. You run into Vivek and Becky. And to sort of touch on them two characters, there's another little thread that I feel like is starting to bleed through here regarding Becky's feelings for Vivek. And it seems like that Donna's jealous of this. It's sort of, I'm getting, that's what I'm picking up from it anyway. And then out of nowhere, the stranger starts talking to you and you start to sort of build a rapport with him. And it was sort of one of those things where you're like, oh, okay, like, let's see what the stranger has. And there's almost this sort of, you know, mind play thing going on, because he says, you know, I'll tell you this, or I'll show you this if you loosen the restraints. And if this was like a sophisticated choice-based game, I'd have been far more cagey, because I'd have been like, well, if I do that, he's just going to run away, sort of thing. But because I knew that this game's like fairly linear, I was like, well, I might as well loosen the restraints because it's probably going to take me that way anyway. I don't know if that was sort of the feeling you had when
definitely. Yeah, definitely. So first of all, apologies for my cat who has to make her
I can't hear her.
Oh, can you not? Okay, that's good then. Yeah, she's just absolutely you know, invading the podcast. It probably disagrees with some of the stuff you had to say. I don't know. I'll go through the chapter a little bit. So I will say I quite like the way it starts, the way it's straight after chapter 2. While the other ones aren't so much. So it ends with you running back to your sister where there's the phone call in the first one. So I like the fact it seems very sudden. So yeah, if you play Donna's chapters back to back, you know, it's a nice blend. One thing I didn't like about the start of Donna's chapter is very much the fact that I really like Ash as a character. She's in quite a difficult position. I don't know if we've, you know, all been in that spot where perhaps you're in a relationship and, you know, the person you're in a relationship with is having an argument with a sibling or something. And, you know, you want to appear nice to the family, but you're also in a relationship. So you almost feel like a little bit of tug at war. You want to please everyone. So I felt really bad for Asher this episode. And I wasn't a fan of the fact that as Donna, when she's trying to open up and help you out, that you can only reply really horribly to her. Because if I had the choice, I would have like opened up and confided with Ash a little bit. And I didn't like the fact that Donna just shrugged her off a lot, because that's not what I would have done. So I didn't. With these games, I like the idea of making the character feel like me, where I can mold it to what I would do. And Donna was very much doing a bunch of stuff that I wouldn't do myself. Even like you said with the stranger, I feel very much like I'm playing as Donna, and I'm restricted to doing these actions I wouldn't do at all. So that is one big criticism I have with the episode. And then again, it does bleed into the fact that the choices don't really matter. However, when we look back at the rest of the episode, like you mentioned, there's the stuff with Vivek and Becky there. So there's an interesting love triangle. There's the scene on the bus as well where Becky mentions the fact that she might ask Vivek out, which puts, you know, Donna in her shell a little bit more. So yeah, there's interesting avenues to how this episode could go. I also quite liked the fact that we mentioned before that you bump into Dan and they get scolded a little bit for not being in school. Quite a few nice layers this game, but I do agree with you. I think it drops off from chapter 1, the opener, a little bit. So it almost does the opposite to what Mina's story's done. So Jack, yeah, in terms of Donna versus Mina, I think you're the same opinion of me as they've kind of almost switched the momentum a little bit. Is there a particular story out of the two of them you're drawn more towards?
At the moment, I'd say I'm more drawn towards Mina's, weirdly. I know and that sort of contradicts because obviously Mina's didn't have a cliffhanger, whereas Donna's did have a cliffhanger. But I felt like in Donna's one, you were very much going back and forth. You know, you was at the place looking after him, then you was back home, then you was at the place, then you was going to school, then you was going, you know, uh, you know, there was no real sense of moving forward in the story until the final couple of frames where Ash turns up. She's like, you know, what's going on, sort of thing. And again, at that moment, I would have confided, you know, so like you were saying, but she didn't. And obviously, you learn that I don't know what this guy is, but he's got green eyes and he sort of has these wings and he can obviously move very fast because yeah, and sort of takes Ash and takes her into this house where presumably he's been taking all these other people to, albeit voluntarily, it seems. So definitely Mina's, and as far as the reasons why, it's strange because I felt that Mina's in chapter 1 was a little bit dull and adult. That's why I like it in chapter 2, which is really weird because obviously it's sort of, you know, oh, it's about getting a job promotion and stuff, like nothing really exciting. Whereas this, you've got that, you've got the marital problems, you've got the drug dealer, like there's these potential threads for drama and it's very adult. Whereas with this, with the school kids, I don't know, maybe it's because it's leapt into this sort of fantastical part of it that it's lost me a little bit because I'm that way inclined. I'm more of a gritty sort of reality based person. So yeah, a rather long answer, but I'd probably say Mina's at the moment, and I'd say that Donna's has sort of gone down in my estimation.
That's interesting. So, you mentioned the final frames you felt were interesting. So tell us what you thought about the ending. So just to recap for people, I guess Ash follows you to the place, to the pool. So I believe she sees you with the stranger right as you've untied him for some reason. I can't remember why Donna would do that or why she did, but she does. She's captive, but decides to untie the guy. And then Ash catches you, so you. Is it that Ash is starting to ring your sister? So I believe,
Might be,
yeah,
yeah.
you get the stranger to sort her out or something, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you make of the camera angle where it's almost like you control all the cameras in the perspective of some weird entity. I don't know what you made of that, and it captured Ash, who vanishes as well as her phone as well, destroying evidence. So yeah, any thoughts and feelings on that ending, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, it was a good ending. I mean, the impression I got was that yeah, Donna started to run after her, and this stranger person who throughout the episode's been building a rapport with her sort of helped her out because you know he didn't presumably want her to get dobbed in. As far as like the whole sort of sci-fi fantasy elements go, I mean, it could go anywhere. He has green eyes, and the opening of the game had like this weird green light. So maybe they're tied somehow. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see in chapter 3 as well, as if like the stranger just sort of goes off grid now, and the characters have then got to find him again, or whether he'll almost reach out to Donna to sort of be like, you know, the problem's sorted. And then she's got this whole dilemma with her sister, like, where's Ash, sort of thing, and she's like, oh, I don't know, I haven't seen her, and you know, you've got all these sort of moments where it's sort of a bit awkward with his sister, where it's, let's face it, the relationship is already strained as it is.
Yeah, definitely. And do you have any theories about the guy's house? Because obviously, in episode one, he brings strangers there, and Vivek claims they don't come out. And then that weird camera angle that I believe claims Ash, there's a camera angle where it goes up towards the stranger's apartment. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
I really don't. I
No,
really
that's
don't.
cool.
Presumably, he's keeping these people for some purpose. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he's killing them. Maybe he's keeping them for some purpose. Maybe that apartment represents almost like this other, other uh, place in space, for example, like in the green light, for example, and they just end up going through there and you never see them again. It could be that, but as I really don't know.
No, that's fair. It's good to keep an open mind anyway. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you think of the stranger, whether you lean towards him or not. So yeah, are you happy to go on to John in Jack's body?
Yes, I am. Um, I like this. It's a change in tone, because I think the episode starts off where you realise that you're in Jack's body, and you then go over to John's apartment, and obviously Jack is inhibiting John's body. And yeah, you've got this whole dynamic with the daughter. Like, you can't appear to be John because it might freak her out. So you've got to pretend to be Jack. And then there's just sort of like it's a very sort of comedic opening. How like Jack, he sort of says, "Oh, I'm fat and old," and he sort of screams bloody murder because he's sort of absolutely shocked as to what's happened. And then yeah, you end up taking her to school and you meet John's friend. Is it Shazia? I think
Yeah,
it's
Shaz, yeah.
yeah, Shazia. Um, and I actually got an achievement in this moment. So it's like you sort of have to go through phobias or something at one point. It's like, oh, what's he got a phobia of? And like one of the options was like cotton wool. So I just picked it. It was like completely random.
I did the same.
Yeah, then that scene finished and it got part of the tune. I was like, oh, get in, sort of thing. So yeah, you had that moment. And then, if I remember rightly, or the next bit of significance I remember is that you go to John's apartment, he's not there, and then you find out that he's meeting Amy, which again it's interesting because it's as far as the story's starting to interweave with one another. Obviously, Amy is Mina's rival for this job, and they're meeting up, and you've got this sort of whole moment where Jack in John Body's like, "Oh, this is me," sort of thing, and she's sort of like, "What the hell's going on?" And you've got to sort of like shut him down. You say, "No, he's my friend, and he's just a bit of a loose cannon sort of thing." And then you have like this moment where you sort of like run after him, and you end up going to a cafe to sort of sort something out. And then Molly has then gone missing, so you have to like run to the park, and you end up explaining to her what's going on. And it's funny, maybe it's because she's a kid, but like she just sort of goes, "Oh, okay." Well, when they explain the whole situation, which again, it's quite funny, and I think it's this story in particular. It's very humorous. Like, it's got layers of comedy to it, so it sort of distances it from the rest, which are slightly more serious. But then it sort of finishes on a bit of a bum note because it's sort of like, oh, what are we going to do? And it's like, oh, well, on Monday we'll just have to go to work. I'll pretend to be you and you pretend to be me. And that's the end of the chapter. So yeah, it's funny, like, as far as like ranking them, like the order's changed for chapter 2. for all of them. I'd probably say I was more invested in Mina's story out of all of them this time round, whereas she was like the one I was least invested in this time. Was that the same for you? Do you remember, or was you still sort of more interested in Donna and John?
So, as someone who has played them a few months ago, and I'm only sort of skimming through them again as the ones you play, just to recap on them, I will admit that it is sort of just a muddle to me, but I will tell you that my order from least favorite to favorite goes Mina, Donna, John, and Jack. So, John and Jack, yeah, like this is probably the worst chapter out of the 5, if I remember right. Like you say, not much happens. It's I mean, obviously there's the adjustment. It's a little bit like an intro all over again. Yeah, there's some really humorous moments, like you mentioned. I like the bit that Molly just sort of takes the body swap or the brain swap in stride, just like, oh, okay then, just like let's crack on with my day. I thought that was really funny. As always, Molly, favorite side character, just never a dull moment with her. Uh, Really interesting to see you, like you say, shut your counterpart down when he's freaking Amy out in the park with, like we said, more crossovers that happen. But yeah, I guess definitely a step down from the first chapter. Um, Another thing as well is, as these chapters will go on with John and Jack, it will explore them trying to come to theories about how it happens. And I think it is a big flaw that they never once just stop and look at each other and think, well, that weird moment we had on the subway with that stranger, it's got to be that, right? They'll never mention that at all until very far. So that's, I found kind of annoying, but I guess the story has to progress, so I guess you can't mention it until late. But yeah, I thought this was a very fun story. Mina, as you've pointed out, probably actually is the strongest of the lot this episode, I guess. I think she needed it though. I think her opener was very dull and slow. But it's nice that they're probably, if you're a neutral, they're probably more on like a level par now. Maybe some just slightly ahead of others, but I think the field is quite even because there's these kind of games where often you'll be so invested in some characters that you find the other ones to play. You just want to get through them so you can play the others again. So yeah, it's nice that they've all got their pros and cons, I guess. But at least with Mina, you're finding more enjoyment playing her, so that's really good to hear. So John and Jack, obviously, it ends on them talking about them having to just accept their lives and go to work to each other's jobs and stuff. Do you have any expectations for that or anything you'd like to see going forward with this chapter? Do you like the fact as well that it's probably the humorous chapter out of the lot, or would you want to see more seriousness from it?
No, I'd like the tone to remain quite consistent. And I think obviously going forward, I mean, Jack is obviously someone who bit of a gym goer, very active, sort of has a friend network, and then John, he sort of works in an office with a boss that's a bit of a job's worth. So I suppose there's potential comedic moments for like the wild contradictions in their lifestyle and how they've got to sort of cope with the other one's way of life, I guess. Which I suppose sort of it will be interesting. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say on that particular chapter in terms of what I expect from it.
Yeah, that's good. So, obviously, before we finish, you mentioned you were inclined to split the game down the middle, 5 out of 10, because and I do agree the lack of choice or the illusion is a bit annoying and frustrating. And what was the other flaw? The linear nature, I guess. Are those things that you've mentioned you've accepted it more? Does that mean you're enjoying the game more and it possibly rises your grade there?
Yes, it's almost because the thing is, it's like if I was to give this like a 6 at this point, and then I know this is like crossing games here, but like, you know, I said it's like Man of Medan in the Dark Pictures. I gave that a 6. It feels really unjustified. So it's almost you have to take each game in a weird league of its own, because on paper, Man of Medan is like a far superior game to this. But I would say that I think, yeah, more than anything, it's just I've accepted what this game is. It's a semi sort of like walking simulator that gives the illusion of choice. And obviously it's like 3 separate stories, so you could almost see it as like I don't know, almost like a book in that sense, where you're changing narrator every so often, but there's a sense that all of these stories are going to come together. So I don't know, I'll give it like a 5.5. But at this point, I'm not sure if it's gonna. I mean, it can potentially go up, but I feel like it's going to be story and story alone.
No, I agree. I agree with your point as well, how you have to put these games in a league of their own, because if I look back and I put, I believe it was Little Hope, I think I gave a 6 out of 10 or maybe a 6.5 or something. And, you know, to put Last Stop in that bracket would almost, in many ways, one could consider harsh, considering one game took probably months or over a year to build, with the insane graphics and the incredible, you know, depth of the game and all the choices, versus this game, which probably didn't take that long to make. Nice little bit of story, fun bit of nature, but nowhere near the depth. But at the same time, it's a very different game. One's a big blockbuster game, the other's pretty much like a small indie game, I guess. So yeah, it's very difficult to do the comparisons like that. But you know, it's good to see that you're, you know, at least fairly enjoying the stories and you're having fun with these games. And yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what you think of episode 3. So you'll be over halfway, I guess, when you play those. So yeah, are you happy to wrap it up there?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Like I say, I'll get on with chapter 3 soon, and yeah, we'll be back and, you know, covering the stories again and speculating, I guess, on where it goes from there. Because, like you say, we'll be over halfway.
All right, brilliant. Well, okay, I guess I'll see you in the next episode.
Yep. See you later.